Welcome to Pramati Hillview Academy digital class. Dear students, today I am going to take up the second part of the chapter, The Happy Prince. Dear students, in the previous session, we learned that this story is about a prince. When the prince was alive, he would be very happy. After his death, a big statue of his would be erected on pedestal. From there, the statue of Prince could see the entire city, and at that time, he would see many miseries of the people, and he would feel very unhappy about that, and he would feel very sad looking at the sadness of the people. So, in this session, we'll try to see how the prince would try to sort out the miseries of the people and with the help of whom he would sort out all those miseries. The happy prince said that when he was alive and he had a human heart, here human heart means the heart which beats, which is alive. At that time, he wasn't aware what tears were and what sorrow was, as he lived in a palace where there was happiness all around. All the people who used to work in his court used to call him Happy Prince because he used to be happy all the time and he had not seen sorrow at all. But now, after his death, they made a statue of him, and through a statue, he says he is able to see all the sadness and many sorrows of the people. And he also says, now, though the statue's art is made up of lead and metal, although it did not have any feelings, then also when it saw all the sadness, he is able to become sad and suddenly he starts weeping. What? Is he not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. He was too polite to make any personal remarks. When the happy prince was telling his sad story, the swallow was thinking about something else in his mind. The bird wondered that the statue of the prince was not made up of solid gold. It was surprised. It thought that from outside the statue was covered with gold, but as it said that the heart was made up of lead and not of gold. It realized that it was hollow and wasn't made up of solid gold. It saw that the statue was very sad and was crying. So it did not make any personal remarks. It did not comment anything about the statue because it was giving the value to the statue's feeling. Far away, continued the statue in a low musical voice. Far away in a little street, there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it, I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has a coarse red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. Seamstress means a woman who makes living by sewing. The statue continued its story. It spoke in a very musical voice that far away there was a house of a poor woman. The window of her house was open, and it could see through the window that she was sitting near the table. Her face was thin and she was tired. Her hands were rough and had become red because they had been pricked by the needle. The woman was a seamstress. She is embroidering flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor to wear at the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking his mother to give him oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water. So he is crying, swallow, swallow, little swallow. Will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal and I cannot move. The woman was embroidering flowers on a gown of the queen's maid. who would walk along with the queen during the court ball. The statue said that the lady who was embroidering the gown had a little child who wasn't well. He was suffering from fever and was asking his mom to give him oranges. His mother was very poor. She had no money. She could only give him water, that also river water. And that is why the little boy was crying. So the happy princess statue requested the swallow to take out the ruby stone from the handle of its sword and give it to the lady. It added that its feet were fastened to the platform because of which it could not move. I'm waited for in Egypt, said the swallow. My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the large lotus flowers. Soon they will go to sleep. The swallow replied that it had to go to Egypt. Its friends were waiting for it. The swallow said that its friends were in Egypt. They were flying near the Nile River and talking to the large lotus flowers which grew there. Soon they would go to sleep, and so it wanted to reach Egypt at the earliest. The prince asked the swallow to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. The boy is so thirsty, and the mother so sad, he said. The statue requested the swallow to stay with him for one night. He asked him to be his messenger and work on his behalf. He said that the boy was very thirsty and his mother was very sad, so it should go and give the ruby stone to her. I don't think I like boys, answered the swallow. I want to go to Egypt. Once again, the swallow opposed his request and said it did not like boys. So why should it help that boy? Moreover, it had to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. It is very cold here, he said, but he agreed to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. Thank you, little swallow, said the prince. The happy prince was so sad that Swallow felt sorry for him. It said that it was very cold there, but it would stay with him for one night, and the next morning it would do his work. The happy prince thanked him. The swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the roofs of the town. Finally, the swallow took out the ruby stone from the happy prince's sword, and the bird took the ruby in its beak and flew over the town. He passed by the cathedral tower, where the white marble angels were sculptured. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. As the swallow was on its way to the poor woman's house, it passed the cathedral. Dear students, cathedral is a church, and on the church's tower, white colored marble angels were sculptured. Then he reached the palace. He crossed the palace and he could hear the sound of dancing from inside the palace. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony with her lover. I hope my dress will be ready in time for the state ball, she said. I've ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstresses are so lazy. When this swallow was crossing over the palace, a girl came out on the balcony along with her lover. She was hoping that the gown which she had given to the seamstress for embroidering would be ready on time. She was talking about the same gown on which that lady was doing embroidering, to whom the bird had to give the ruby stone. He passed over the river and saw the lanterns hanging on the masts of the ships. At last he came to the poor woman's house and looked in. When the swallow flew over the river, ships also came along the way. Lanterns were hanging on their sails. Finally, the swallow reached the woman's house. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired. The boy was suffering from fever, and for that reason, he wasn't able to go to sleep. So he was turning left and right on his bed, and his mother was very tired due to working for long and had fallen asleep. In he hopped and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. The swallow put the ruby stone on the table near the thimble. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. How cool I feel, said the boy. I must be getting better. And he sank into the delicious slumber. After keeping the ruby stone on the table, the swallow went near the boy as his mother was sleeping, and no one was taking care of him. It shook its wings near him, because of which the boy could feel the cool air and felt better. The boy felt that he was getting better and went to sleep. With this, we can make out that the swallow was a kind hearted bird. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. The swallow flew back and went to the statue of happy prince and told him what all he had done. It is curious, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold. Now the bird felt warm. It says that it was very strange that it was feeling little warm even though the weather was very cold. That is because you have done a good action, said the prince. The prince said that it was feeling warm because it had done a good deed. It had helped someone. And the little swallow began to think and then fell asleep. Thinking always made him sleepy. After listening to the happy prince, the swallow started thinking, and when he started thinking, he felt sleepy because whenever he thought, he used to feel sleepy. When the day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath. Tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. Next morning, the swallow bird went to the river and took a bath, and thought that that night he would reach Egypt. He was very happy. He visited all the monuments and sat a long time on top of the church steeple. So the swallow bird visited all the monuments of the city, and finally he went and sat on the high tower of the church. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Have you any commissions for Egypt? He cried. I'm just starting. When it was night and the moon rose in the sky, the swallow went to Happy Prince and sought permission to leave for Egypt. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you stay with me one night longer? I'm waited for in Egypt, answered the swallow. Now again, Happy Prince requested Swallow to stay with him for one more night, and Swallow replied that he needed to go to Egypt because his friends were waiting for him. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in a glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. Here, the happy prince is telling the swallow about his second work. He says that far away across the city, I could see a small dark room at the top of the house. A young man is sitting. He was sitting on a desk on which The papers were spread all over, and he was trying to work hard. He had a glass lying near him in which withered flowers were lying. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as a pomegranate, and he has a large and dreamy eyes. Further, the happy prince gave a description of that boy. He said that his hair were brown and crisp, which meant that he had not taken bath for a long time. His lips were red like a pomegranate, and he had a big dreamy eyes. That means that this boy was very ambitious and hardworking. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theatre, but he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. Further, the happy prince said that this boy needed to finish writing a play. He was a writer, and he had to give the play to the director after writing. But he did not have strength to write any more because he was feeling very cold. The boy had no money, so that's why there was no fire in his fireplace. And he was very angry, also due to which he was feeling very weak. I will wait with you one night longer, said the swallow, who really had a good heart. He asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. The swallow understood what Happy Prince was trying to tell him. He knew that Happy Prince wanted to help this boy, so he agreed to stay back for one more night. And further, the swallow asked Happy Prince if he should take another ruby stone to give it to the young playwright. The students, playwright means the person who writes play, just like he had given it to the old lady. Alas, I have no ruby now, said the prince. Prince said that it was very sad that he did not have any more ruby stones with him. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago. The happy prince said that he has his eyes which are made of very precious and rare sapphire stones which has been bought thousands of years ago from India. He ordered the swallow to pluck out one of them and take it to the playwright. So Happy Prince told Swallow to take out one sapphire and give it to the boy. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play, he said. The Happy Prince would say if he gets this sapphire, he would sell it to the jeweler and would buy firewood, and that would make him to finish his play. Dear Prince, said the swallow, I cannot do that. And he began to weep. The swallow was very sad to learn that Happy Prince wanted to give his eyes to that boy, and he started crying. He told Happy Prince that he could not do so. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the young man's garret. It was easy enough to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. Through this he darted and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. When he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. But then the happy prince ordered the swallow to do what he had told him to do. So finally, the swallow took out one eye, one sapphire out of prince's eye, and flew to the young man's garret. There was a hole on the roof of the room, so the swallow entered the room through that hole. The boy was sitting with his head on his hands, and that's why he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wing. And when he looked up, he saw the sapphire stone lying on the dried flowers. I am beginning to be appreciated, he cried. This is from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play. And he looked quite happy. When the boy saw the beautiful stone, he felt that some admirer, some person who praised him, had sent a gift for him. So he thought that with this he could finish his play. The next day, the swallow flew down to the harbor. He sat on the mast of the large vessel and watched all the sailors working. I'm going to Egypt, cried the swallow, but nobody minded. And when the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Next morning, the swallow bird flew down to the harbor and sat on a mast of a ship. He spoke loudly that he was going to Egypt, and when it was right, he flew back to the happy prince. I have come to bid you goodbye, he cried. Swallow once again told the happy prince that it had come to say goodbye. He was going to Egypt. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you not stay with me one night longer? And once again, happy prince requested Swallow to stay with him for one more night. It is winter, answered Swallow. The snow will soon be here. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. The swallow said to the happy prince that the winter season had started and after some time it would start snowing. The weather in Egypt was warm, and even the crocodiles lay on the mud lazily there. So he told him to let him go to Egypt. In the square below, said the happy prince, there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money. And she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her. Now, this was the third assignment. The happy prince said that there was a match girl, she was a little girl, and all her matchsticks had fallen in the gutter and got wet. All her matchsticks were spoiled so. She could not sell them now, and she would not earn any money. And when she would go home without money, then her father would get angry and beat her. For this reason, the girl was crying. Further, the happy prince said that she wasn't wearing shoes or stockings, and she had not covered her head. She was very poor. So he said to the swallow to take out another sapphire from his eyes and give it to her so that her father would not beat her. I'll stay with you one night longer, said the swallow, but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. Again, happy prince told Swallow to do what he had ordered him. So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. What a lovely bit of glass, cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. So finally, the swallow obeyed the happy prince's order. He took another sapphire stone from his eye and flew to the little match girl. And when he saw the match girl, he bent very low and kept the sapphire stone on the little girl's hand. The little girl was very happy to see the stone, and she went home happily. Then the swallow came back to the prince. You are blind now, he said, so I will stay with you always. When the swallow returned to the happy prince, he told him that now he was blind, and so he would stay with him forever. No, little swallow, said the poor prince, you must go away to Egypt. But happy prince said to the swallow that he should go to Egypt. No, I will stay with you always, said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. But Swallow refused and said that he would stay with him always and slept on the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands. The swallow used to stay along with Happy Prince all the time and used to tell him the stories of the different places that he had visited. Dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery so great as misery. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there. The happy prince said to the swallow to tell him wonderful things, but added that nothing was more wonderful than the suffering of people. No mystery was bigger than sadness, and he wanted to know who all were sad in his kingdom. So he asked the swallow to go and let him know what he saw while flying over the city. So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates. He flew into the dark lanes and saw the white faces of starving children looking out listlessly at the black streets. So the swallow flew and took a round over the city and saw that the rich people were living happily in their beautiful houses. And they were partying while the poor people were begging and sitting outside the gates. Then he went to the dark lanes where there was no light, where the poor people lived. There he saw that the children were hungry, due to which their faces had turned white. Under the archway of a bridge, two little boys were lying in each other's arms to try and keep themselves warm. Further, the swallow saw two little boys under the archway of the bridge. They were lying much close to each other so that they keep themselves warm. They were poor. They did not have food, so they were trying to keep each other warm. How hungry we are, they said. You must not lie here, shouted the watchman, and they wandered out into the rain. Two children were starving and wondering that how hungry they were. Just then a watchman appeared and scolded them. He shouted and made them go away from there. The poor children kept wandering in the rain as they were homeless. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. Swallow went back to Happy Prince and told him what he had seen in the city. I am covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy. The happy prince told Swallow that his whole body was covered with fine gold. He could take tiny pieces of gold from his body and give it to the poor people in need. All the living beings required money, and when they would get gold, they would feel happy. Leaf after leaf on the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. Slowly the swallow took out the gold layers from the statue of Happy Prince, and as he removed the layers of the gold, the Happy Prince's statue started looking dull and grey. Leaf after lead of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played in the street. We have bread now, they cried. As the statue of Happy Prince started looking dull and grey, the children grew happier because through it they were getting food to eat. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. Finally, it started snowing, and when a lot of snow fell, everything froze. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. Everyone was wearing clothes made of fur. Small children were wearing red color caps and were roaming here and there. They were skating on the ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. Swallow bird was feeling very cold, but he kept on sitting near the happy prince's statue. He did not want to leave him because he loved the happy prince. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. The bird did not want to die, so he used to go to the bakery where the baker used to bake the bread, to eat the bread crumbs and try to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. The swallow was aware that he was about to die. He had only enough strength to fly back to the statue of happy prince. Goodbye, dear prince, he murmured. Will you let me kiss your hand? Now, when the swallow is about to die, he says to the happy prince that can I kiss your hand? I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow, said the prince. Happy prince thought that swallow wanted to go to Egypt, so he said he was happy that finally the bird was going to Egypt. You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you. Happy prince said to the swallow that it had stayed there for a very long time, and now it should go to Egypt. It wanted the bird to kiss its lips instead of the hands, because the statue loved the bird. It is not to Egypt that I am going, said the swallow. I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not? And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. The swallow bird said to the happy prince that he was not going to Egypt but to the house of death. He added that death was a brother of sleep. He kissed the happy prince on his lips and fell down to the feet of the happy prince and died. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. As soon as the bird died on the happy prince's feet, an unusual sound came out of the statue. The sound was of the breaking of the statue's heart, which was made of lead. The heart broke because of the death of his beloved bird. But it is said that it was so cold that the heart broke into two pieces. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below in company with the town councillors. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks, he said. The next morning, the mayor of the city, along with his councillors, was taking a round of the area where the statue of Happy Prince was erected. And when he crossed the statue and looked up at it, he said that the statue of Happy Prince looked untidy. How shabby, indeed, cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. The councillors always agreed with whatever the mayor used to say, so they also asserted that the statue looked untidy. The ruby has fallen out of his sword, his eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer, said the mayor. The mayor noticed that the ruby stone which was placed in the handle of the sword was missing. The sapphires from the statue's eyes were also missing, and the layer of the gold from its body was also missing. In fact, he is little better than a beggar. Little better than a beggar, said the town councillors. The mayor said that it seemed as if it was a statue of a beggar, and the town councillors agreed with him. And here is actually a dead bird at his feet, continued the mayor. We must really issue a proclamation that birds are not to be allowed to die here. And the town clerk made a note of the suggestion. The mayor noticed that a dead bird was lying on the feet of the statue. Then he told the town councillors to pass an order that birds were not allowed to die on the feet of the statue. And the town clerk made a note of the suggestion given by him. So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince, as he is no longer beautiful, is no longer useful, said the art professor at the university. The art professor of the university said that now the statue of the happy prince did not look beautiful and wasn't useful anymore, and so they should demolish it. Then they melted the statue in a furnace. Means, so they melted the statue which was made of lead in a furnace. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. The supervisor of the foundry saw a strange thing. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away. The heart of the happy princess statue, which was broken into two pieces, wasn't melting in the furnace. So they threw it as it is in the dust heap. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. Coincidentally, they threw the heart of the happy prince where the dead swallow was also lying. Bring me the two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. God asked one of his angels to bring him the two most precious things of the city. The angel brought the two pieces of heart of the statue and the dead swallow bird. You have rightly chosen, said God, for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forevermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. God said to the angel that it had brought the right thing. It had chosen the right things, which were indeed the most precious things of the city. He said that the bird would always sing in the garden of his paradise, and the happy prince would stay in his city of gold and admire him. Dear students, I hope you all have understood and enjoyed the lesson, The Happy Prince. Dear students, this chapter, The Happy Prince, gives us many important messages. The first message is that we must spread happiness around us if we wish to be happy. It is useless to mount statues with gold and jewels when the people are hungry. The prince was happy only as long as sorrow was not allowed to enter his palace. Once he saw pain, suffering, and injustice, even his lead heart cried. Generous prince and swallow sacrificed their lives. Their power of love made them live forever as the precious and chosen ones of God. Dear students, that ends the chapter, The Happy Prince. I'll come up with another chapter. Until then, bye students. Take care.